Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about Fallout's voiceovers. Now, what made me think of this was yesterday I had to take part in some voiceover sessions for another project I'm involved in, and I happened to mention to someone there, and this was done in Stockholm, so I ended up getting up at like 4 in the morning so I could get on a Zoom link to the rehearsal. And I mentioned to some of the people there that I had not done this since Fallout 26 years ago, 27 years ago. And so that this was kind of, not new to me, but still somewhat novel. The whole thing with voiceover in games is it tends to be done, you try to do it as late as possible, so all the scripts are written, everything's ready to go, the game is as stable as possible, so you know things aren't going to change, but you can't do it too late in the process because you have to get the cast in a studio, you have to have them do their lines, you have to pick the lines you want, you have to have them cut, you have to have them put into the game's database, you have to associate them to the correct lines, and then they have to be tested. So this has to be done early enough to get all that done. So you try to put off doing voiceover until late in the process, but early enough to get that stuff done. If you remember what I mentioned in an earlier video, at one point we discovered late in Fallout's process, just a few months before we shipped, that whole areas hadn't been designed. Well, we discovered that after we did the voiceover. The voiceover, I think, started in late 96 and we did it in early 97. So this is why the voiceovers sometimes don't match. It's why Aradesh mentions a Viper gang that we never had time to put in. It's why the guard out in front of the Brotherhood of Steel tells you to go in one direction, and then his unvoiced assistant next to him pipes in, "Oh no, we got new intel. You have to go in another direction." It's because literally something changed after we had that recorded. By the way, just recording that guard is a story in himself that I'll get to. So this is a lot of work to do this. And Charles Deenan, our awesome audio director, found us an awesome voice director, Jamie Thomason. I met him a couple times. He knew everybody. He was super good at what he did. And I actually went and watched once, and I can confirm that. He was just really, really good. We were really lucky to have gotten him. But when we started doing the voice over, my plate, I was already coming in every day, 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. And as you know from a few previous videos, about the time of early January is when we lost the GURPS license, so we had to make a whole new system and program it. And that was when Jason Anderson and Jess Hennig decided they were going to script companions into the game, and we needed a lot of new code support for that. So my already overflowing plate was now just jammed. There was literally a single second free. This is where Fred Hatch stepped up, my associate producer. Fred handled all of this stuff. He was the one who coordinated with Jamie, got him all the scripts, sometimes literally took a script up to Jamie the morning of, the night before. Remember I wrote what Ron Perlman said for the open narration, the whole war never changes, because we didn't really like what had been written. So I rewrote one, and there was no time for anyone to look at it. There was no time for editing. Basically wrote it that night. Fred took it up the next morning, and that's what Ron Perlman said. He said that one and the other one, and we chose mine, and that's what shipped. So that's how down to the wire we were. And Fred did all this. Fred basically took over handling voice production. We gave him a credit for that in addition to production assistant, just because he handled a lot of stuff that normally the producer would handle. And as the producer and lead programmer and designer, I just couldn't do it. It was crazy now thinking of all the hats that all of us wore. Everybody was super busy all the time, but people just stepped up when stuff had to be done. So Jamie had found all of these amazing voice actors. I even went back to the credits. I mean, we had David Warner and Cree Summer and Tony Shalhoub. He did Galaxy Quest just a couple years later. CCH Pounder, who's on X-Files, Ron Perlman, which we've talked about, Richard Mull from Night Court. That's the story I'm going to tell you about too. Tress MacNeille, Tony Jay, Brad Garrett, Keith David, who I knew from They Live. You know, he's the guy who had the long fight scene with Rowdy Roddy Piper in the alley. But now I know him as Elroy Patashnik from Community. I mean, Clancy Brown from Highlander, Richard Dean Anderson from MacGyver. I mean, these were famous people coming in to read lines for our game. And it was all because Jamie knew so many people. They were all super nice. I'll give you an example of how cool they were. At one point, Fred called me from, they did this up in Hollywood. Part of the reason these actors would do it was 4 hours in a Hollywood studio. That was probably 10 or 15 minutes from where they lived. So they could drive in. They knew Jamie. They got their script. They read it. 4 hours later, they were gone. They got paid SAG rates. Easy job. No rehearsal, no makeup. They just drove in, said their lines, left. Fred called me in a panic one day because the person who was supposed to do the guard outside of the Brotherhood of Steel, it was a well-known actor on a well-known TV series with a very, very specific voice and voice pattern. I'm not going to say who it is, but apparently that's all he could do. So this guard sounded just like a well-known TV character, which wasn't what we wanted him to sound like and what we certainly didn't want him associated with. So Fred called me in a panic and he's like, I don't think this is going to work. So somehow we found in the budget we could hire someone, but who? Well, Jamie knew Richard Mull, the guy who played Bull from Night Court, called him up and said, can you literally come down? He had no idea what this was. He just knew Jamie and he's like, sure, I'll come down. It's 4 hours. You know, boom. Came in, read that character. It was awesome. Awesome. And that's only why it happened. And they were all really nice. Fred called me one day and said, hey, normally he'd come back around 4 and he goes, hey, I think it was Ron Perlman. He just offered me some tickets to a Dodgers game. Do you mind if I go to that instead of coming back to work? And I'm like, no, as long as you get the audio tape into the audio department by tomorrow morning, I don't care what you do. And so he went off to see a game. And it was very cool. In fact, I was a little jealous because Fred would come back and he'd tell me how much fun he had up there. Even though it was a lot of work, it was a fun studio. So I wanted to go and see because I've never done any job but making computer games other than briefly teaching computer science as a grad student at UCI. So I wanted to go up and see what this was like. I was always curious what other industries were like. So one day I was going up and I think Leonard and Jason went with me. We went up and I wanted to watch David Warner do his lines. David Warner was the photographer in The Omen. He was the ultimate evil in Time Bandits. Awesome actor, awesome voice actor. And he did Morpheus in Fallout, and I wanted to watch him do it. So we went up there, we introduced ourselves to him, or Jamie introduced us, and he had said he had just started doing voice acting. He had done one game before this. He would go on to do many more. But he was hoping to get into a variety of characters because he said, well, I always do evil. And we all got quiet and we're looking at each other. And I was like, the character you're doing today is evil. And he said, oh. And we had, I think Leonard had brought a picture of Morpheus because he was a talking head and we had finished the clay head. And so he had a picture of him. He went, oh, okay. He went in and he did an awesome evil Morpheus. I mean, if you played the game, you've heard him. I just remember there was one scene that I thought was great. I was like, this is amazing. He got it first take. And Jamie, after he's done, said, David, I love that. That was great. But I was hoping you could really lean into it. Like, Morpheus is dropping the mask now. It's no more Mr. Nice Guy. He's not pretending he's not evil. I just want to feel that. And David Warner went, okay. You know, I'm thinking, he just told David Warner what to do. But David Warner was like, okay, I can do that. Second take. Absolutely amazing. And I still remember saying this. It was like evil was dripping down the walls. It was so rich and emotive and intoning evil. You were like, ooh. And it cut. JB says, cut. That was great. And David Warner's like, You know, he's a nice guy. And then the perfect part of it was, so he ends doing that. And the door opens and in comes one of the voice studio employees with a tray of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies, which they had an oven there. They baked these and just brought them around different studios. So we all sat there eating chocolate chip cookies, listening to the replay of all these evil lines. It was awesome. I remember thinking, this is perfect. This is why, you know, this is what you do in an environment to make people comfortable and happy and willing to do it. It was a fun time. Needless to say, Fred handled getting all the rest of those guys and more. I listed those people. That's just a fraction of the people we had. Got them all done, got them in. Yes, we then had to redesign some games so things don't quite match. And we fixed that by having non-voiced characters make up for it. And sometimes just having people mention things that just, you never found this Viper gang, but they're out there. And then later games put them in. This is just what I love about it. And I wanted to explain all this to you so you guys could hear, first of all, what something like that is, how it's done professionally, but also just how this was how video games in Hollywood first started meeting up. It got, much tighter later, because movies started using CG and actors floated more readily between games and movies and TV shows. It just, the barriers started falling down. I'll probably have to do it in another video, but this is also what AI is going to change, because you can do voices more readily, which means since the voices can be done by an AI, I think in real time, you can wait until the last minute after everything is done to insert voice. But I'm not 100% sure that AI will ever be able to replace that, because watching these actors do this work, they would sometimes put something in to the role, into the voice, that you didn't even know you wanted. Like I said, I thought David Warner's first take on Morpheus was great, but Jamie got this second take on some of the lines out of David Warner that was beyond my expectation. So I am worried that AI may give us a lot of those good first takes. I don't know if they can become great. They will solve the problem of getting stuff in at the last minute, but I think we'll lose something. And that might be true for all the AI. That might be true for art, for programming, which I hear AI is coming for. So we'll see where that goes. But all I can tell you is what I see with voice actors is amazing. And what I saw yesterday at 4 a.m. while I drank coffee and paid attention to what was going on in Stockholm from, my little house in Seattle. It was amazing watching these young actors just pull these amazing emotive voices and expressions and intonations out. And I thought, this is where the magic happens. And I was glad at some point at the start and end of my career, I got to be part of that. I got to watch people who are masters of a completely different craft show me a little glimpse into what they do. And I hope that gave you a glimpse into it as well.